I want to create a drink
Only
that is pretty much always going to be incremental
Founder of a revolutionary new hangover relief beverage.
when I sell it into a store. The main thing that Red Bull gave me was they gave me the opportunity to build Soul Tonic on the side while paying me a full-time salary. I was still full-time at Red Bull. I just ordered it and had no clue what to do with it. That's where most people get it wrong. When they're going in for these major range reviews or these pitches, they're usually speaking quite selfishly, talking about everything that they are, who they are, what they're doing, but it never ends up being about the retailer, who they're trying to pitch to. It's always about them. I've done every single thing myself. Every single store we're in is through me. Every retailer, Woolies, Dan Murphy, everything has been through me.
Your drive, your passion, your commitment, you really remind me of me.
On the outside, it looks like all of these things are happening, but on the inside, it's a mess and we're broke.
Sophie Hood, ex-Red Bull, ex-LVMH, and now founder of functional wellness brand Soul Tonic, winner of Food Stars, and building a global brand across Australia, US, and UK. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you very much for having me, both of you.
Quite excited to chat today because I think there's a lot of interesting ways we can take this, especially around the retail first avenue that you have taken with Soul Tonic. But I guess I'd love to start with like why functional beverages, why Korean pear, and probably giving a bit of an overview of why that's used as a base, and then also why you've taken this route into sort of the functional wellness beverage market.
Love it. Well, I was always interested in Eastern wellness. I guess the brand actually started with an interest in Korean skincare before it exploded. So this was around 5 years ago. I was friends with a beautiful Korean girl through my EY grad program, which is where I started in strategy consulting. And she kind of opened me up to the world of Korean skincare, which I thought was really interesting because when I'd look on the ingredients of the back of the skincare, it was using kind of natural roots and extracts, which was very different to the skincare we were using kind of in the Western world. And I was asking her about these like extracts, and she was like, well, we drink them. This is all about preventative healing for us. It's all about, using kind of nature. And as I kind of delved deeper into this with her, I became hyper fixated and fascinated on a bunch of these ingredients that were grown in East Asia. And so to cut a long story short, with the help of my acupuncturist at the time, I was taking all of these like herbal tonics. I basically wrote a business plan on how to create a drink using some of these ingredients and took it to the Korean government and the Korean International Trade Association, and they gave me a translator. And that was kind of the beginning of what now is a more functional wellness brand. But at the beginning, it really started as just exploratory into some of these ingredients. And because I was working at Red Bull at the time, I thought it was so interesting that, Australia is such a health conscious nation. I was living in Bondi Beach. Why does this giant category of these ingredients in beverages exist on the other side of the world, or in Asia and beyond, but not really in Australia? So that was kind of the origins, but it's definitely evolved and expanded through my partnership with Mr. Park, and we've created a lot of iterations of the original drink that's definitely more leaning towards hydration, wellness, recovery versus kind of originally how it was positioned.
Yeah, it's interesting. Keen to chat about Mr. Park because I feel like that's such a character you've built. Obviously, incredible person that seems that you're working with, but it's sort of a character you've built within your content, which I want to touch on maybe later. But in terms of the positioning, I think it's really unique. You sort of started within hangover care or recovery, exactly. And it's sort of positioned, I assume, as a smaller market to sort of get traction. But now you've widened that, it seems, over the last few months, 6 months, a year, to more now hydration, which is obviously another growing market, and then some other elements that are sort of adjacent to hydration. So what is the thought process between, I guess, starting with something that's a little bit smaller and a little bit more niche, and then expanding that out over time into hydration and these other categories?
So originally the thought was, because I've always been in commercial roles, the thought was, okay, if I'm going to go into the beverage industry, I want to create a drink that is pretty much always going to be incremental when I sell it into a store. And hangover recovery, the pre-hangover market, there was no real players that were playing in that space in Australia, but it was such a big established category in South Korea. So I knew that it could work, and I knew that it could be part of people's routines. And because it was always going to be adding something into someone's routine prior to alcohol, I knew that it would be a really good commercial selling point. So that's kind of how I thought. And then I also was kind of like, well, why don't we do anything around drinking? Like, we have such a big drinking culture. Why aren't we doing anything for prevention? And so I kind of liked that idea of prevention and the ingredients being all natural and leveraging Mr. Park's patented extraction method and, you know, delving into all of his, you know, I guess through his ancestors of knowledge. So that's kind of how it started. But then as it's evolved and through my personal interest in wellness and hydration, I love that the ingredients we use provide so many natural electrolytes, kind of like coconut water. And so since that, we've also been able to spike it additionally with electrolytes and move more into the recovery space as well. And, you know, compete against a hydrolyte, but in a very different way, in a more natural way versus spiking it with sugar and fake artificial colors. Because I always found it so crazy that hydration was a random bright color when it shouldn't be. Like, hydration should typically at its core look like water. So, or it should look natural, which, you know, the ingredients that we use in Soul Tonic are.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think the comparison to coconut water is actually really interesting because I think a lot of people, that market has been built out really rapidly, say over the last year. So that comparison of natural electrolytes actually makes a lot of sense and probably is helpful in terms of the positioning for your products as well. In terms of South Korea and sort of their drinking culture and how that product's being used now, like how does that compare to Australia? I'm really curious. Is a very common practice for these types of drinks to be used prior to drinking? Is drinking, you know, really prevalent in that market, you know, similar to what it is in Australia? Like, how does that look?
So there definitely is a big drinking culture in South Korea, but it stems more from respect. So, you know, you go out for dinner and you drink as a form of respect and you drink certain things kind of more ritualistic.
Yeah.
There definitely is, like, there's a big nightlife culture there as well. There's big, you know, hard liquor culture, but it's not wildly different from Australia. But the interesting thing about the South Korean market is that you go into a 7-Eleven and half of the drinks are these natural tonics and recovery sticks and recovery jellies and like little like shots of ginseng that you can take. And people don't see it as a way to then go out and get blind. It's really the way they're trained is like prevention and, you know, setting themselves up for success. Whereas in Australia, you know, of course, I've heard every spectrum of the comments being in this industry, as you could imagine. And so many people think that if they have a Soul Tonic, they should go and have like 50 drinks because they've had that. And I'm like the Korean pear is amazing, but the humble pear is not going to solve all your problems. Like, obviously not. But in South Korea, it's much more accepted that you know, you'll do as much as you can to prepare your liver and to help your liver pre and post, but you don't expect it to do everything. It's kind of like eating healthily in like for prevention for getting sick as well. Like, you're just doing the best possible thing to set yourself up. But yeah, it's really interesting understanding the cultural differences, but particularly if you go there, you're so shocked by how many of these products exist there and are huge, you know, contributing, you know, billions of dollars a year to the category, but very much don't exist at all in Australia.
It's very interesting. I feel like I might take a leaf out of that. And if anyone asks me about my drinking, I'll say it's just out of respect.
Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think there's, I think you touch on it on your website in terms of, you know, we're not for binge drinkers, which is probably more the Australian way in terms of, you know, taking the pear and thinking you can have 10 beers and happy days. But, you sort of talk about living fully. And is that sort of the more maybe South Korean way in terms of being able to, you know, look after yourself more, fully from a wellness perspective and still enjoy the drink? Like, is that sort of the angle that they take and this just forms part of that sort of, process?
Yeah, it's more of this like social recovery tonic. So playing, you know, you can kind of have it all in moderation, I think is the right way. But, you know, I find that South Korean people are generally healthy. Like, you don't find many overweight people there. They have a cosmetics industry that is seriously booming. Every second place is plastic surgery. They definitely care about how they look as well. And I think it's kind of all feeds into probably, you know, the natural way that they eat, and they eat fermented foods and the way that they look at things. And it's just culturally how they've been brought up. Whereas in Australia, we're very much all or nothing, it feels sometimes.
Definitely. And it's interesting. You touched on hydration. And I think hydration is crazy at the moment, isn't it? There's a brand popping up every week. It's definitely, there's a lot of noise within the hydration space. What are the misconceptions that people have? Like you've talked about natural hydration. You know, if I look on, and I'll get targeted now on Instagram because I've mentioned hydration, but there's brands popping up with, 1,000 milligrams of salt or sodium. There's sort of different sort of formulas. Like what are the misconceptions about hydration that people aren't aware of?
Oh my God, I have so many things to say to that because we actually are developing one of the cleanest hydration drinks on market. It's fully clear. It's a yuzu hydration tonic, but it's like literally looks like water because hydration should look like water because electrolytes are clear. So if you're drinking anything that is extraordinarily brightly colored, there is something that's being added to that drink to make it that color. And it's most likely a fake chemical or an artificial color, right? It doesn't really need to be there. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that there are lots of different strains of electrolytes. There's lots of different types. So what kind of magnesium is being added into that electrolyte sachet? Is it a really poor form of magnesium that's not very bioabsorbable? Is it one that supports muscle recovery? Like what is it? There's so many different types, right? And most of the larger hydration brands are using really cheap types of electrolytes, same as with potassium and same with sodium. And then on top of that, so not only looking at what exact, like is it potassium citrate, chloride, etc. If you're an average person who's working a full day job behind the desk and you're going to Pilates and you're doing a walk, you do not need 1,000 milligrams of sodium in one hit when you are putting salt on your avocado toast, putting salt on your steak, salting everything all day, right? Why you literally cannot, like you just do not need a salt hit that big. And I'm seeing all these girls on TikTok that are drinking 2 or 3 of these sachets a day, but they're not a marathon runner. They're not an elite athlete. They're not sweating much. And it's just sodium overload for no reason. And that's probably some of the biggest misconceptions. I'm not saying, I think some athletes definitely the 1,000 milligrams of sodium, or if you've done like some hectic run and you truly have sweated it out and you really need to replenish, fine. But there's not many females I know that are doing that on a daily basis that would ever need that kind of electrolyte. So I think there's a lot in that. And also the fact that we just are accustomed to these hydration drinks tasting so sweet and fake. Like why is that?
I think it's interesting when markets grow this quickly that they do extend probably too far one way. And I think that's probably happened with hydration. And that's why I was keen to hear the misconceptions, because I think it's a product that can be marketed really, really well and get traction, but might not even be right for the right individual that's taking that, if that makes sense. And I think you touched on it, like, I picture, like, for instance, myself, if you've done a walk in the morning, but you haven't actually trained, and then you're having 2, which you could easily do throughout the day in terms of maybe 1,000 milligram salt sachets into the water just because it tastes good. It's like, is that really beneficial? So it's interesting hearing, the perspective from more of a natural way and being more, which is what health should be, more individualistic into the end consumer.
Like, I'll give you an example. My neuroscientist has developed the exact hydration blend for our new tonic, for our 2 new SKUs that are the clear hydration ones. And we're putting 200 milligrams to 250 milligrams of sodium in. That's what he believes is perfect for everyday hydration. Fine, if you're going for a 42K run, drink 2 of them, fine. But that is the right amount of sodium to activate the potassium and the magnesium in the right way that actually makes the drink a proper hydration drink. So that's something to note as well. If you are interested in, if you're drinking too much salt, which you can drink too much salt, because I put salt in everything else, kind of as I said, if you're not eating any other salt throughout the day, okay, fine, maybe it could be okay. But I don't know many people who aren't putting salt on their dinner or lunch or brekkie, to be honest.
All of the above, right?
Yeah.
It's part of eating food is a bit of salt. It's at least what I enjoy. Looking at, I guess, the new product with the 250 milligrams, do you see there potentially being, I guess, some education needed around having less sodium? I've worked with a couple of different brands in the past, and whether it's collagen, and some will say 10 milligrams and 20 and 30, and people, I guess, tend to associate better with more or more with better. And so do you think actually by lowering things, not necessarily turn people off, but if they see something 250 versus 1,000, they, I assume, will think that, hey, 1,000's got to be better for me?
I think so, but I think it will also depend on the rest of the blend. For example, this blend is very high in magnesium, which is very rare to get the dose of magnesium in product, particularly in RTD, at what we're doing. So we've got a lot more to lean on in terms of like the overall amount of electrolytes. But I do think the soda, I think there's this middle market that exists, that's a bit of white space, which is just the general punter, everyday hydration, the going to the office, the where you guys are right now. Drinking something before coffee is a big one because coffee spikes your cortisol. You could drink a 3-calorie everyday hydration tonic that would actually mean that your cortisol's then not spiked for the coffee, but it means you also haven't had 1,000 milligrams of salt, even though you've just been sitting in the office. Like there's all of these different use cases that I see, or like you're going to the gym at lunch and you need something after just to feel like you've replenished, but it's the right amount before going back to the office. It's like, I think these hydration drinks were originally built for athletes and for also when you were really sick. So it was, you're kind of medically given them. And that's the amount of salt that sometimes when you're at the doctors, they're like, you need this, right? Because you're sick. But somewhere along the way, we took the athletes and the medicine and we made it mass market without anyone really realizing what had happened. And I think now, the consumer's becoming slightly more educated. You can just put it into ChatGPT, it'll tell you. Like it literally spits out that exact thing. So yeah, I think there will be education, but I also think the consumer is more educated.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of people who are picking up Soul Tonic might not necessarily be shopping for Gatorade or Powerade or something like that. Slightly more discerning and are probably a little bit, I guess, better educated on the benefits of the electrolytes, the hydration. With these new SKUs that you're bringing to market, how do you think about cannibalization across your range? Because there's kind of the hydration piece. You've mentioned yuzu. There's obviously the recovery, the prevention. Is that something that you're concerned about, or do you see them all kind of working together and overlapping? So you do A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, rather than one, not the other?
I think none of them cannibalize each other, except potentially these 2 hydration SKUs that have a slightly different flavor. Like you could probably choose in between them. I think the OGs are prevention and restoration, kind of pre and post. And in different markets, they've been spiked with electrolytes for added electrolytes, but not, you can drink it as a hydration drink, but I don't think it's going to replace these new hydration drinks, which are like 3 calories, literally look like water. We're not using the Korean pear. We're using yuzu extract. We're using Korean strawberry extract. It's like keto. It's going hard into that everyday hydration space in a really chic way, neuroscientist backed, but still Mr. Park is developing it in conjunction with a Korean university. So it's really exciting. We've still been able to, ensure that the supply chain is all through Mr. Park. The story's kind of there, but it's probably going to have an offshoot sub-brand underneath it because Soul Tonic is really, the ritual and the Mr. Park and, all the learning from it. Whereas this is not a traditional Korean drink. This is an adaptation of like a Western cultural thing that's happening right now that I saw as an opportunity that Mr. Park is jumping on with me. So it sounds a bit confusing, but it's like there might just be a sub-brand underneath. And that's the tonic that I've been pitching really heavily to Qantas for launch on their long-haul flights.
Well, it's probably a good opportunity to talk about, I guess, mythical Mr. Park. I know that, you've got referenced him, but it'd be great to, I guess, provide a little bit of background. Like, how does one find a Mr. Park for their business? What does that relationship look like? I know you mentioned the Korean government. That's probably not how most people approach new markets or approach production. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to hear, I guess, why, but then also how.
Yeah, it is. I knew that I needed a partner that knew these ingredients and knew production much better than I did. And I was always in the business of wanting to partner properly with someone and wanted something more than a traditional transactional manufacturing relationship, particularly if I was going to go into this kind of industry that was quite niche. So yeah, I wrote the business plan. I ended up getting in contact with the trade association and they gave me a translator, and most South Korean, farmers or work in food manufacturing, they don't really speak English. It's not like working in Japan where, a lot of people speak English. If you go to Seoul, you actually often don't hear much English at all still. So that was always a barrier, was the language was a bit of a barrier. I was actually choosing between Mr. Park and this other guy who was a diplomat, and he spoke amazing English. And I was about to go with the diplomat, and then I had this like gut pull to Mr. Park because the diplomat, I was like, easy. He speaks English, like it'll just be easier for me. But then Mr. Park had this insane story, his extraction methods, like he'd been studying food processing and pear farming in university, and he has this insane farm, and we give back to the local community and all of these initiatives, and only hire elderly people in the factory, and have a restaurant to give to the orphanage, and all of this stuff. And I was like, it has to be him. But the diplomat that I didn't end up going with, he ended up trademarking my designs in South Korea, and I've been fighting a trademark law case for like a year and a half because he liked the concept of Soul Tonic, trademarked the designs, and then tried to get funding to do it himself, which is really quite crazy. So at the same time, starting with Mr. Park saw this happen, and Mr. Park informed me and then put me in touch with a trademark lawyer. So yeah, that's just like an aside, which is really a shame because I've had nothing but positive experience otherwise doing business in South Korea. I think the culture is incredible. I think everyone is incredible that I've met and is part of the wider team, because 98% of my team are Korean. They sit in the office in Gangnam. So, and that's where that's who I work with, on a daily basis. And so, yeah, when I met Mr. Park, he's always been so incredible, right? Like with the first meeting I had with him, he hired a limousine and got his friend to like drive around on it. We got the train from Seoul to Jeonju, and we went to all of the local restaurants. He put us up in the hotel. We talked about business and our ambitions and what we can do together. And then kind of as it's transpired over the last 3-4 years, it's been incredible. We've in all of these different markets. Mr. Park's come to Australia twice. He's already visited me in New York. I've gone to Seoul about 5 times. He's already planning another trip. I've now given him full IP rights in Asia. So he's just produced the first container to go to Japan, and he's selling in South Korea in the next couple of months. His full D2C website is going live.
Wow.
So I'll send you guys the photo, but the Korean version of Soul Tonic is hilarious. The pouches, they're hilarious. They're amazing. I love them. But I just never in my wildest dreams thought that we would be selling back into the market that is the most saturated competitive market in the world, that is South Korea, that now Soul Tonic is entering that market. I just never thought that. And I'm so happy that Mr. Park gets all the profits from that. Like, he deserves that. He's incredible. So, and that's why it's really exciting to be able to just say that I have a single supplier, and I think that's quite rare these days.
Mr. Park, I mean, it seems like he honestly is such a legend. Like in terms of the content, I was having a look on TikTok last night, and what was coming through, I was like, this guy is awesome. And I can see that obviously there's part of using that in your content, which is, it makes sense. But in terms of just him as a person and the relation you've built, you can actually see that through the content, which I think is actually really special. And it is unique that you have one supplier and you're building, I guess, instead of, figuring out the product, you're sort of building around Mr. Park to a certain degree and building around his supply chain, which I think is quite a unique avenue, but it definitely makes sense from using that as a strength, which may not be a strength of yours, and then you focusing on, the other elements of the business. And I think, when you look at your Instagram, your website, there's a lot of feel of, and authenticity sort of tying back to South Korea. Like, how important is that to sort of everything you do? It seems like you're definitely trying to build obviously a global brand, but very much rooted within sort of that, that South Korean sort of culture.
I think we've been really cognizant that, like, I don't want to rip anyone's culture off. It's really important for me to talk about where it's come from, where it's originated, why it's important, where the ingredients are, what kind of impact we're making. That's always been really important, and whether people get that or not, that's their choice. But we've tried to do that from day one, versus, there are many other brands that's not a priority for them. And what I say to people is, how many brands do you know the face of their manufacturer? I don't know many brands where I literally know who is behind producing it. I would say I know about 5 off the top of my head, but not many more than that. And whereas Mr. Park, he's become such an iconic symbol and part of Soul Tonic, and he loves it. Like, I can't explain, like, go onto Mr. Park's Instagram. It is just photos of Soul Tonic and me and things. And like, when I won the show, I went and we aired the finale in one of his friends' restaurants in Seoul. And he was just like smiling the whole time. Like, I just can't even explain. This is everything to him. And I think when we fully launch in South Korea or in Japan, people will realize, oh, wait, this is being sold in Asia through Mr. Park as well. Like, this truly is a global brand, and it's something that we've really built together. And I'm always the first to be like, Mr. Park is the partner in this.
That's iconic. I'm definitely giving Mr. Park a follow today. I'll be searching him up on Instagram. Following
we
the
like collaborate with stuff on all the time. Like I'll ask him to be like a collaborator on like some photos or a reel.
That's awesome.
He loves being in front of the camera. Like he's all for it. Like he sees a camera and he's obsessed.
I feel like that's rare.
Yeah, it is rare. Yeah. And I love when you had I think he was reading the Australian Business Review and that he was in that and there was content on that. Yeah. I thought that was really, really cool. You actually touched on something really interesting a little while ago around sort of getting a gut feeling that Mr. Park was the right partner, and maybe the other diplomat sort of on paper looked like the right partner to go with, but your gut was telling you something different. Is that something that, I mean, I definitely feel that within sort of business and making certain decisions, whether it's Morning Man or Plus 40, that there's a lot of decisions you maybe don't have the rationale like you do for other things, but get the gut feeling stronger, so you go in that route. And a lot of the times it works out. You know, how important is it listening to your gut, and do you think about that at all when making decisions?
I do, because sometimes your gut, as you spoke to, is kind of all you have. You don't have, you might not have a precedent, you might not have a financial model that backs what you're doing, but you have to listen to something. And pretty much every time that I haven't listened to my gut and I've listened to, say, someone else, or I've listened to some other like rational opinion, it's always turned out to be wrong. And I've always gone, oh my God, like I knew that I should have just trusted myself and I should have just listened to my gut. And that has happened enough times for me to really trust myself now. And we move at such a fast pace. And you guys can imagine too, like every day is so different, and you just can't and ah over decisions for too long, because you're just going to be left behind. So I would much prefer to make a quick, fast decision that I trust myself on, that I think is the right thing at that time. And if it's wrong down the track, fine, I'll wear the burden of that. But I would much prefer to just keep moving on and trusting myself, because I think that's how we've kind of gotten, or how I've gotten this far, is through just a series of these decisions. I've made like so many mistakes, like truly, but so's everyone. But yeah, I would definitely say, I mean, Mr. Park, like that, if I had gone with that diplomat, can you just imagine? Like I wouldn't be in this business today.
And like, how quickly are you typically turning around NPD? Like, I know it's can be a lengthy process, but again, speaking to that, I guess the advantages of a small business is that you can move quicker. So yeah, I don't know, how long have you been working on it? And I don't know if you can share any release dates, or it might be too soon.
So Mr. Park has been working on it. Like I've been working on the formula for like 8 months, but Mr. Park's been working on the actual product since for probably 3 or 4. Because the hardest thing with the electrolyte thing is I don't want it to taste electrolyte-y. I want it to taste like a really refreshing water. And I also want it to be like 3 calories. Like I want it to be nothing. And I want everyone to understand every single ingredient. So it's actually quite hard to formulate, because electrolytes are typically quite bitter. And that's why they're masked by so much flavor and sugar, or like fake sugars, or whatever it is. So to create this balance is actually quite technical. Whereas if I was to create a hydration sachet, I could do it in a week. Like so easy. It's so easy. But whereas when you're kind of, as we were speaking before with like the matcha in a can, when you're developing something that needs to be shelf stable and can sit there, it has to, you know, absorb in a different way. And, you know, you have to do stability testing and a bunch of stuff. But once I've got the formula ready, I can go pretty fast on getting and approving like design works. And because like with the pouch originally, we use a black lid, which is really expensive, and like the MOQs for the black lid were like 360,000. Early days of my business, I was like, I can't use a black lid. I can't commit to 360,000 units. But now I'm at a stage where that black lid is shared across multiple SKUs in multiple markets, and you know, so I can leverage stuff that I'm already doing. It's much easier to add products versus start from scratch in a new category.
Can you hear, I guess, about the early days of bringing the product to market, Sophie? And I've heard some great stories about you with a bunch of product in the back of the Yaris, ripping it through Sydney, dropping it off at different liquor stores. So perhaps we can take this fresh start to chat through, I guess, a little bit about that scrappiness, the early days of, you know, kind of bringing the brand to market. 50,000 units in your garage at your flat. Yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, well, I will say 50,000 units were out in Western Sydney, where I was doing trips in my shitty Yaris to get as much stock as it would fit into the Yaris, then into the Bondi Beach garage, much to my housemate's dismay. She did not sign up to whatever ended up happening in that Bondi Beach flat. But I guess I was still full-time at Red Bull, so I didn't really know how to deplete the stock. Like I just ordered it and had no clue what to do with it, essentially. So before and after work, I would go to any store that I thought was cool or that I shopped at, mostly around the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and I would just sell the product in before and after work. And, 9 times out of 10, or actually 10 times out of 10, the store manager had never heard of the product or the concept or anything. And I would just have to give them free units and ask them to put it on counter. And I was just so confident that it would sell based on the look and feel of the product, because people would buy out of just pure intrigue. And then I knew once they started using it that they would be a repeat customer. And that's exactly what happened. It was basically built the business just through these like specific independent retail stores. And yeah, like it taught me a lot about sales and hustle and, just doing everything you can from the ground up, which was, I think, so important, to be honest. And I'm so glad I had those early days, because those stores are some of my highest performing stores today. And I'm so close with not only the store managers, but often these are family run stores. So I know like the parents or the grandparents, and because you go and pop in the stores constantly. So those early days were definitely so important. And I just like laugh thinking about that, because like some things also don't change. Like I'm in the US and I'm still kind of doing that as well. And I'm like, oh my God, like you think that you're going to outgrow some of these things, but at the end of the day, you kind of can't outgrow anything. That's kind of not the mindset you have to have. Your just like load of work just seems to get more expansive and diverse. So one second you're doing like having a CEO style decision, and then the next you're literally, like selling into the corner store.
I mean, that's part of the fun part, like that's part of the journey and part of kind of building these businesses. Like I think you've got to kind of keep it a little bit scrappy. And like you said, that's how you kind of keep ahead of the big boys when you might not necessarily have the same resource, but you've got potentially more drive and I guess more flexibility in kind of doing these weird little things that don't necessarily make sense, but it all compounds. And like you said, those relationships are, those will last a really, really long time, and you might get preferential placement or whatever it might be, but it actually becomes more about the people and the different, kind of relationships you build rather than just kind of slinging product.
And I think it's interesting the selling to stores, because I think, Connor and my background is very much in sort of mass retailing, grocery, conventional grocery, naturals, mass retailers across sort of Australia, US, UK, and Europe a little bit as well. And it's interesting, I guess from our experience, our process is definitely going to sort of category managers or the key buyers, and a lot of it's done over email. You go through a formal review process, but I think people forget that a lot of these stores are just individual store owners, or there are store managers that have a lot of pride in their store. So there really is the opportunity to go in and pitch directly to those stores, at least as an opportunity to get feedback as well, not just to sell in. So I guess what did you include in your pitch in day one? What were the important elements that you were pitching to these customers? And then how has that changed? Because I know when I first started pitching to retailers versus what it is now, it's completely different. And I've taken a lot of learnings from that journey, but I'm curious to see what they are for you.
I almost want to ask one of my original retailers what I said to them, because I think I probably blocked it out, because as you said, the pitch has changed so much as the business evolves, as you get feedback. And I'm similar now. I deal with category managers and buyers and go through the formal range reviews as well, because you kind of have to once you start getting real scale. 100%. But early days I couldn't go to a Woolies on this niche product that they'd never really understood or heard of, or there was no brand equity or anything. I think I really led with the fact that it's incremental. It's particularly in the bougie like wine stores. I was like, this is just a high margin add-on, and it will seem like nothing when your customers are buying their $50 bottle of wine. They'll happily buy this for $7. And because it was Bondi, then I went into the kind of health prevention angle as well. And I think because I was literally the founder and I went in and I said it and I was just there, I think they just didn't know what to do. I think it was more like, I guess we'll just take on this girl's juice. They were just kind of at a loss of what to do. It was probably easier just to take it, get her out of the store versus fighting with me. Because you see all the like alcohol reps when I was at Malt Hennessy as well, and when I was in these liquor shops, all the alcohol reps would be coming in, doing their tasting of the whole thing and blah, blah, blah. But mine was just so simple. It was just one product. And I didn't want a tasting. I just wanted them to put it at counter and just see how it went and to call me if it sold. And that's kind of how it went. But yeah, now it's evolved so much.
It's interesting though, even from the start, I think you touched on some really key points that I think is still true to a good pitch for today. And I think touching on those would be, what problem are you solving for the customer or the retailer? And I think the big one you're bringing there, or the value that you're providing, is incrementality. So everyone is still going to buy their beer or their wine or their spirit, but they're adding this in as an extra. It doesn't compete with what's currently on shelf. So you've sort of identified that white space, which I think is really important. And then other two factors being price. So price is a big one within retail. It's probably one of the biggest levers. And you saying, it's $7. So in comparison to the $50 wine, it's nothing. So that's a really good sell. And then third was focusing on the assortment. So instead of going in with 10 different items and sort of creating actually a headache for this customer to then decide, you've gone in with one, which makes it really, really simple to say, yep, let's trial that one product and then, grow from there. So it's interesting. Even from day one, you've got a lot of sort of things that obviously makes sense in terms of how you've scaled to where you are today and got success and runs on the board.
Thank you for dissecting it so positively. Definitely, that's not how I was thinking back then, but I love it.
I'm an optimist.
Yeah, and I guess building on what Luke said there, I think so many brands are kind of fighting or trying to figure out the role that they play in these categories. And it sounds like it wasn't necessarily intentional, but you've actually got a really strong proposition for these retailers in terms of there's no cannibalization, it's all incremental. It's actually increasing the basket size of the average spend of each customer, which I think a lot of brands, will be pitching into a Walmart or a Target or these major retailers, and they're actually not sure the role that they play within the categories, and they start sitting there and talking about their brand, but it's me, 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 me. It's actually not about the retailer, the white space, the role that you play in the category, which I think in many cases is the key to landing a launch, because it's, not what they can do for you, it's what you can do for them.
Totally agree with that. I think that's where most people and a lot of my business owner friends get it wrong when they're going in for these major range reviews or these pitches. They're usually speaking quite selfishly, talking about everything that they are, who they are, what they're doing, but it never ends up being about the retailer who they're trying to pitch to. It's always about them. And I think that's the biggest mindset or attitude shift that you need for sure.
Agreed. And do you work with people in terms of, say, brokers or sales partners to execute that? I know you said the team is quite lean in terms of, partly being based in South Korea and then partly being based here. How do you, coming from, that corporate background, did you have retail experience coming into what you're doing now? Have you just learned and then, essentially implemented your learnings, or are you working with, people that have played a part in sort of shaping that retail strategy? Yeah,
it's so funny. I'm now hearing of all of these brands who are using, brokers to get into Coles or whatever, someone to help them get into 7-Eleven. And I'm out here. I've done every single thing myself. Every single store we're in is through me. Every retailer, Woolies, Dan Murphy, everything has been through me. So except for, now in New Zealand with a distributor and some support in the UK through a distributor. But even so, I was over there and meeting the buyers and pitching and that kind of thing. So no, I've never really used a broker or someone who's given me sales support. The team is so lean. On the Soul Tonic side, there's literally just me and a couple of ad hoc freelancers and some digital marketing support and CMO style stuff, but no one that helps operationally, sales, BD, supply chain, anything.
So that all sits with you.
Yeah.
Wow. So maybe, I'd love to, that was exactly where I'm going. So I'd love to touch on sort of, how do you do that? What does the day-to-day look like? And I guess, maybe even touch on the scale that you're at now, and that can be number of doors or volume or whatever that looks like, but sort of how are you, achieving that scale with such a lean team?
It's a good question. I get asked this a lot. I just am really reactive in my inbox. So, which I hate being, I want to be really proactive. I am definitely bogged down with a lot of the operational stuff. I think we have 4,500 to 5,000 retail stores, but then there's a lot of stuff, moving parts going on in different markets, as I've set up every market myself as well. So that's the major problem, is the setup, the new warehousing, the supply chain, the operational stuff, the dealing with the customs broker, the freight, how is it all going to sit? And then, the integration into certain marketplaces and how everything fits. But yeah, if you look at who's managing the Dan Murphy stuff, the Woolly stuff, Amazon, all of that stuff, multi-market, it's all me doing it. And I'm, receiving the PO, putting it on, doing the thing, seeing how it should be stacked, getting the pallet label, sending it to the warehouse, instructing them what to do. It's too much. Like I need to figure out the best way, but I've just never found the best way to integrate someone in as I'm growing. Like it's never felt like the right time. But I think with the sales side, some help in the US is probably where I'm at, just because, I've done some good things in New York. I'm in some of the coolest stores in New York and it's been great, but I need like a national retailer, like someone to, something really to just open up a huge amount of volume. But I've been waiting to have my supply chain kind of set up first, which it now finally is.
And so it sounds like you're gearing up for mass retail, kind of reading between the lines. How have you kind of approached that, as you look to expand in the US? I know it sounds like everything runs through you, but what is your view on kind of channel selection? I know you could probably go anywhere, everywhere. You could play in the convenience through to the natural, through to even a Walmart or a Target. Is this something that you're actively approaching, actively exploring?
So I haven't approached any of the major national retailers yet, although I do have a lot of friends that have launched across Target and Walmart, like CVS even. My strategy here originally was be in the really high-end brand stores, and then you'll probably get picked up organically by celebrities and influencers, which kind of is what happened. And, have had a lot of natural exciting things have come off the back of that, like some really cool like Brooklyn artists reach out and then we collaborate with them for New York Fashion Week, and we've done really cool things because we're not in mass retail yet, so we're just kind of this like cool niche brand that's in like some beauty stores and like expensive stores over here. We're in some random fashion retailers. So people in New York are definitely seeing it in a few more touch points now. It's like when they go get their sauna, they'll probably see a Soul Tonic. Then when they go and get their bougie groceries, they'll probably go see one. And it's kind of just around, which is kind of how I did it in Australia, in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. But I think it'll get to a point, as it did in Australia, where it's like, this isn't a sustainable business model for the future. So I probably will approach mass retail. I wanted to get some data points on the US consumer, and I just wanted to get as much feedback as possible while things were really manageable and small. And my distributor in New York just does New York, New Jersey, so it's contained to 2 states, and then the rest of the country kind of orders through Fair or some kind of other wholesale platform. So it's in all random states, but not massive volume or anything. But it gives me really good data points of like who's ordering, who's repeat ordering, kind of the sell-through. And the sell-through here is just so impressive for a brand that has barely any brand equity versus Australia and New Zealand. You just forget that there's so many people here and that people are consumers and they just want to consume. And that's probably been the most surprising thing. Like I knew it, but I didn't know it to this level. You can place a product in any store that doesn't even make sense to be in that store, and it probably will sell.
The US is wild. And I think I've probably been working with brands maybe across the last 5 years in the US, and I'm still astonished with like how big the scale of the US is. Like each different state is like, bigger than Australia in terms of consumerism. So it's so interesting in terms of when you get over there, you realize, wow, like how do I attack this? Obviously one, but then B, the upside and the opportunity is monumental. And it's interesting. It sounds like you're taking a very much sort of state by state approach or a more focused approach with focusing on New York. Is that very intentional versus trying to go too wide too quick?
I think it's just because I'm here and my warehouse is in New Jersey. So I just wanted to build things around me and where I understood and where I could actually make connections. But it'll get to a point where that won't be the case. But I think it makes sense for now. I wanted to be close to the stock. I wanted to know if there were any issues. I didn't really know much about like the customs and the importing and what brokers to use and even warehousing here. I didn't really know how that looked versus in Australia. So I just wanted to feel safe with what I was building here. And then once it's to a point where I'm like, oh, okay, like I know I can scale now. It's like, I'm ready to go. Like I can just turn it on and it can go.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I think having those touch points where you are, especially based on what your experience is, being able to actually go in store, and sort of be on the ground. It sort of makes a lot of sense to that strategy. And I'm still surprised that you're doing so much in the business. Like I'm still thinking about this going, God, how do I structure my day to do more, which is quite interesting. So I'm thinking I'm going to need to share some notes with you after. But I guess like founding any business and going, you know, across multiple markets, scaling within retail, like it is challenging, right? Like building a business is bloody hard. Like there's a lot of days where so many things go wrong, and particularly because you're sort of the sole point for so many of those things. And I think about just operations alone, like operations can be brutal to say the least. Like, are there many days that you have had, you know, thoughts of being like, this isn't going to work? Or, you know, has there been any challenges that have suitably like stopped you in your tracks and be like, this is a really hard thing to overcome? And obviously you've overcome them, but are there any challenges / learnings that you can share?
Yeah, so it's less around like there's so many operational issues and supply chain issues and complexities between markets. So many, and, you know, late shipments and things getting delayed. And, you know, I was sold out for Black Friday. So we were air freighting in pallets and pallets to even fulfill Woolies POs and stuff like that. It was just costing a fortune. And I was just like, this is so annoying. But I'll tell you what, interestingly, the most times that I've wanted to quit is when I've run out of money. So I have overextended. I've spent, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands on stock, and I haven't looked at my cash flow management, or my working capital is just not in the right place. And I'm like, we have no money in the bank account, and all of this, we have all this stock, we have all of these invoices coming in. And then that's when I'm like, oh my God, like on the outside, it looks like all of these things are happening, but on the inside, it's a mess and we're broke. So it's been those moments where I'm like, is this, you know, I had an incredibly good salary job. I was making a lot of money, a lot more money than I'm making now personally. I was like, is this, you know, why am I doing this? Like, not that everything's money related, but it's just the stress of potentially not being able to pay someone, or, you know, not be able to do the things that you want to do in the business. So they've been the major moments. And that happens quite a lot because in product-based businesses, working capital is one of the biggest ongoing problems that you have.
Totally. And I think it's interesting, like, and I resonate with, from the outset, you know, people seeing your posts on LinkedIn and everything looks incredible. New retailer here, new distribution there, you know, this many stores. But I think people forget that in any growing business, particularly if bootstrapped or minimal investment, you know, there's just daily challenges from finance to operations. And it can just, sometimes you can have this sort of complete separation between what the outside view is and what the actual inside working is. And I think it's completely natural in terms of a smaller business trying to achieve big things. But sometimes it's funny to sort of have those reflections and be like, if only people knew.
No, literally. Think about that all the time. And the thing is, like, because these businesses, they're so visible versus, say, a service-based business, or, you know, a business in a really boring category that people don't, it's not very visible. Like my friends see Soul Tonic every day, like somewhere, and they're like, you're everywhere. I'm like, but it doesn't show the size of the business really. It just means we're visible. We're just in more spots that you're in, or I'm in more spots that my friends or family or, you know, immediate customers are in. But I think that's a bit of a misconception. You know, I get told all the time that I'm like killing it, or like, you know, all of these things. I'm like, yeah, that's nice, but you know, I don't truly feel that way
yet. Moving towards it.
Yes.
I feel like the goalposts always move though. Like I think it's, you know, and that's the part of entrepreneurship, is like you're kind of chasing the dragon forever, and it's just you're never going to catch up. But it's also part of the fun and kind of what keeps you motivated and kind of keeps you pushing forward.
Exactly.
And it's part of just, I guess, the common traits of people that are building businesses and entrepreneurs is that you're never satisfied. And I think it's a positive and a negative all wrapped up in one, but you spin it as a positive. So I think that, definitely relates to that sort of changing of goalposts. But you touched on your sort of corporate background and obviously Red Bull, LVMH, massive brands, things that have started small, like Red Bull story is incredible. It's one of my favorite founders podcast episodes on the guy that founded Red Bull. If you haven't listened, definitely recommend. But how did that prepare you for building Soul Tonic? Are there any frameworks, any learnings that really were really pivotal in what you've then been able to do? And I guess another thing you touched on was around, you know, you were on a better salary and you've taken this hit, which a lot of people maybe in the corporate world particularly would look at and go, hey, so this is crazy. What are you up to here? And maybe that was from parents or relatives. Like, were there any challenges there in really making that jump?
I guess the other misconception about working in a big corporation, even though Red Bull in some ways was run like a startup, but it's a big global brand, is that when you're in a role, you're really only working in the confines of your role. You have people above you, below you, to the side of you, and you often don't get exposure to actually the entire business and the operational layer of it and how decisions are really made. So I was kind of working in commercial finance in the on-premise team. I was kind of informing the CFO and the sales director on, I basically owned like the decision making behind where a can went and how much it sold for in on-premise. And that was really smart in the sense that, you know, I understood on-premise, off-premise, you know, the strategy behind Red Bull, which was like, you know, it wasn't always a commercial decision, it was a brand decision. So oftentimes we'd show up at a festival and we would make not $1, often we'd lose money, but the brand impact and the impact on the consumer was far greater. And I guess it made me think about that when I look at my brand, is that not everything has an ROI. Some things are just meant to be a really cool thing to do. And that's just it. And that Red Bull was so good at that. And I liked that. And I learned a lot in looking at things a little bit more unconventionally and looking at marketing in a different way. And I think that was really handy. But the main thing that Red Bull gave me was they gave me the opportunity to build Soul Tonic on the side while paying me a full-time salary. And I can't say many jobs would do that, because most people who are at law firms or accounting firms, they were like, we would be fired within a second. Whereas Red Bull very much is this culture of Red Bull does give you wings. They really, you know, I used wings leave, which is this extra leave you get in the year to go to South Korea 2 years in a row. And that was my leave that they gave me. My sales director was fully aware of what I was building. And so that is, I think that supportive environment and that culture is just the best part of Red Bull. Like, I could go on about their culture forever. It's the best culture I've ever been in. And then in terms of the salary, like, yeah, I was getting paid really, really well. I wasn't too worried about making the jump because I had won the TV show, which was what was the trigger to take the jump, because I won a cash prize. So I wasn't too scared at that time, because I was like, I'm just about to win all this money. So I can probably afford now to quit. But now that money's like completely long gone. So now I'm back being like, salary would be nice.
Red Bull truly living by their tagline, which is really cool to see that actually filter into their culture. I think that's actually quite unique and probably speaks to why their culture is so great.
At the scale as well, right?
Yeah. And so that's Food Stars, and I assume you took leave as well for that. Obviously
yes.
I would love to hear more about that. Like, what did that look like for you? Obviously, you've met some incredible people through that. You won it. Like, what was that experience like? You know, even touching on Gordon Ramsay as an individual, you know, what is he like?
Yeah, he's hilarious. I think he's the best. So yeah, I spent 5 weeks with him. I did take essentially over a month of annual leave from Red Bull to film that show. They were aware that I was filming a show for a side hustle. So that's also testament to them allowing me to do that. It was a crazy experience, like, you know, very much reality show, like Survivor meets MasterChef meets Shark Tank. You know, you're living in these service departments, you've got the cameras on you 18 hours a day, you're doing these challenges, you can't go to the bathroom alone. Like, it was a full thing. It felt like, yeah, like an entrepreneur's version of like Married at First Sight or something. So I guess every day was just a new day on that show, because I had no media training. I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea what was going on. And I guess once I was on the show, I became quite competitive in the sense that I was like, oh, now I'm here. Like, now I want to win. And so it was pretty cool to be able to do my final challenge being the TED Talk about Mr. Park, and that to be the winning like challenge where I won the money. But yeah, Gordon's just like, he is him. Like, he is the same as what you see, but he's got a really big heart, and he's actually really kind, but he's funny, and he's larger than life, and he's huge, like caricature, with like thick makeup on.
For the last question, maybe Con, on your side that we've missed. I mean, if not, we can touch maybe on the TED Talk, because I know that sounded pretty crazy in terms of you had to, and I don't know if I've got this right, but you had to prepare like the night before, didn't really sleep, and then deliver this TED Talk for, was it an hour or some crazy amount of time?
Yeah, it was essentially, so with all the challenges, they give them to you either the day of, or they give it to you the night before, and they're filming the whole time where you're preparing. And so often because you're being filmed, it's really hard to like prepare and to think while you're being filmed and while there's camera crew everywhere. So often you'd only be actually preparing at night when you had time to yourself in bed. So you weren't sleeping. That was the other problem. So with the TED Talk, they gave it to us the night before, but we spent that whole night like on camera where they were like, you know, they wanted to see the scenes of you preparing, but you can't prepare when there's like literally cameras in your face. So, and then the next day it was in Fed Square Theatre. They'd invited 300 people, heaps of industry heavyweights. Obviously Gordon Ramsay and Janine were at the front, but there was also like heaps of people in the industry because also Gordon is very famous. So a lot of people wanted to go and see him as well. And yeah, so my TED Talk went for about 45 minutes, but what was shown on the show was probably like 8 to 9 minutes of that, because they have to do all the cuts. They have to show you preparing, they have to show the finale, they have to show the who wins, they have to make it dramatic enough. But that was absolutely crazy. Like that was, an insane experience. I feel, but then the show didn't air for a year later. So it didn't air. So I filmed it in March of 23. It didn't air till March of 24.
But you knew you had won, and you knew
No, I knew I'd come first or second. We filmed two endings. So I didn't know if I'd won or not.
And so you learnt as it was airing, I assume, surrounded by friends and
family?
family?
Finale, on the afternoon of the finale. So I had to watch the whole show not knowing on Channel 9. And then in the afternoon, I got a call from production saying, tonight you're going to win. And that, thank God, because I'd already planned the finale party and had all of this. So
the celebrations.
It was a night. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's incredible. And I think, I mean, not many people back themselves to do that. And then obviously not only to do it, but to win. So it's a testament. And obviously it's interesting that it happened a year ago. You probably continued building that business, obviously, for that next year. And it was probably in a completely different state too, which is quite interesting. But yeah, I guess congratulations to all your success you've had to date, and definitely cheering from the sidelines in terms of what you do next, especially in the US and the UK.
Love it. Thank you guys. Really appreciate you having me on. And excited and blessed to be guest number 2. I'm going to take that as a compliment.
Absolutely. Top of our list. Really appreciate it, Sophie.
No, welcome.
Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.